This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light.
Hello and welcome to Godly Play. I'm Becky Sams and I'm the Christian Formation Director at Church of the Advent. And I'm here today with Marty Tabor. You're going to see her in a second. She's the Christian Ed Director at St. Mark's and my wonderful husband who is doing all the filming and editing. We're here at St. Mark's because Marty and I are going to be co-teaching Godly Play. We're going to be filming the lessons and posting them on our websites so that our families can follow along when it's convenient for them. I want to express a little gratitude to the Reverend Candace Lesher at St. Mark's for sharing all of these wonderful materials. We're so blessed that we have such a great relationship with St. Mark's. Marty not only is the Christian Ed Director here at St. Mark's, but she's our very own bookkeeper at Advent. She's one of my great friends, and she's also my cousin. So we're keeping it in the family. So when I first encountered Godly Play, it was probably about 20 years ago. Marty said not to mention how long ago it was because it would make me seem old, but I am. So my son was young, and at that time I held Marty's position at St. Mark's. And I was fortunate enough to work with Charles Hawkins, who's the minister at that time, and he fell in love with Godly Play. And I was privileged enough to be trained in Godly Play, and I brought it to St. Mark's, and they're still using it today. So we're revitalizing it a little bit, getting to enjoy being with each other. So I was immediately captivated by the process of Godly Play and how interactive it was for our children. Gives them a really nice language for talking about God. So Godly Play was developed by a gentleman by the name of Jerome Berryman when he lived in Italy in the early 70s. And he was there studying Montessori learning. And he felt it had such a powerful effect on children and created some real beautiful spiritual formation for the kids. Many people were talking about this approach, and he decided it definitely was going to be his path. So fast forward to 2020, Godly Play is taught all over the country and the world. There are over 100 beautiful stories that he's written, and they all come with these gorgeous handcrafted boxes and figures and felt pieces that the storyteller uses to communicate these very important lessons to our children. And I say that we focus on the children, but these stories can lend themselves throughout our entire lives. And at the end of this video, I have this wonderful reflection that I found that's so timely in our really unsettled times. So I want to show you around the Godly Play room. They're typically set up like this. The shelves are real low because it's child focused. The circle of children form around the storyteller. The shelf behind me is called the focal shelf, and it holds really important stories like about the Holy Family and World Communion, the temple, stories about Easter and Advent, Bethlehem. This is the circle of the church year, which will be our first lesson that we'll record and post after this introduction. We've got Easter here. I've got a beautiful big sand tray right here that will tell all of the lessons that are in the desert. So we'll use the sand tray to tell all of those stories. This bookshelf contains the parable boxes, and I love the parable boxes, and I've opened one up to show you what's inside them, but they are in a box, so they look like a gift, and the children can access all of this and play with it when they want to revisit the stories. But we talk about in the parables how the boxes are gold and they're gifts that we receive when we're born, and sometimes they're easy to open and sometimes they're harder, just as it is to understand that story. So the shelves on the other side of the room contain the books of the Bible, Old Testament stories with the Ark and the flood, the Good Shepherd. So we just have access to all these beautiful materials, and I just cannot thank St. Mark's enough. So Marty and I have had a great time working on this in the last couple of weeks, and we hope you all are as excited as we are. Once the children enter the room, before they do, they're met by the door person. This is always a two-person team teaching approach. They're met by the door person who greets them and says, "Are you ready? Are you ready to come into our sacred space and join the circle?" So these are all my friends right now and the children that we're using. And some of them are from Marty's family and some from ours. Some are from the nursery at Advent, so they may look familiar to some of our younger parishioners. So they enter the circle, and the storyteller waits till everyone's settled and asks, "Are you ready for the story?" And the storyteller takes all this deliberate and slow-paced time to find the story that they're going to tell. So we're building the mystery. And they bring the story box. In this case, this is the parable of the mustard seed, you may recognize. And they open the box, and one piece at a time you lay out the underlay, and the tree grows, and the gentleman that's dropping the mustard seed, and this beautiful picture of how big a mustard seed tree gets, and little teeny mustard seeds, and all these things that the children can then come back to and retell it themselves. When they have this type of material, they're so much more engaged, and they can play with it and tell the story and learn it, and they just love it. I've found that this is just a wonderful approach. So this would be a typical parable box. Once the story's told, I take my gaze from the focus of the story. It's always on the contents of the box or the tray that you're working with. And then you move your eyes to the children and you ask them a series of wondering questions. The wondering questions in this parable, something like, "Now I wonder if the person who put those tiny seeds in the ground had a name." Or, "I wonder if the person was happy to see the birds coming to the tree as it grew." "I wonder if you see yourself in this story." So there are questions like that that provoke a conversation that these children engage in and share with. And that's a blast. That's when we all learn from the children. So once that wondering section is over, we move to a response time where we ask the children how they'd like to respond to the story, if it's through artwork or if they want to go back to another story that we've told. If they're tired, if they want to take a nap, they can take a nap. After the response time, we have a snack, a small snack. It could be animal crackers or goldfish. And we say a simple prayer after everyone is served. Everyone sits there and waits for the rest of their family to be served. And we just say a simple prayer like, "Thank you, God, for these wonderful children and for this feast. Amen." So after our feast, we clean up and the children are dismissed. So Marty and I will be filming the stories, and then we'll lead our parents through the response time and if they want to do a snack at home. We are putting together boxes of supplies for response time if your children would like to reflect on the stories. And we will reach out to you via email to gather the names of people that are interested, and we'll get you those craft materials. So Marty and I are very excited to bring this to our children and our families, and we hope that you all will join us. We'll post a couple every month and let you all follow that at your own time. I know everyone's really busy right now. So in summary, the reason that I believe that Godly Play is so important is that it really gives our children a language to talk about. feel it, touch it. We believe they have an innate sense of God, that this will allow them to have a certain language to talk about God. So thanks for your time. Thanks for listening.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine.
When I was reviewing my Godly Play material and looking on the website at all the new things that have happened and the chapters and lessons that have been developed, I read something that I wanted to share with you all. It made sense to me in that Godly Play isn't just for children, and it lives with us timelessly as we become adults, and these lessons can relate to current times. So this reflection was by Chaplain Courtney Webb, and it was particularly moving to me. She used some of the exact language from a Godly Play lesson called The Second Creation, The Falling Apart, and it was about Adam and Eve and in the Garden of Eden. And the quote is, "They could only go forward, and they did." They could only go forward, and they did. We find ourselves in an in-between place, a global pandemic space, where we don't know what the journey ahead holds. Our daily lives are experiencing so many differences. We know that we cannot go back to when it was all together and pre-COVID. Jerome writes in this story, "The differences always did something wonderful. Now Adam and Eve could take things apart and put them back together again. They could be creators, almost like God. They couldn't make something out of nothing, but they could make something out of the differences. After the differences, Adam and Eve could not go back to when everything was all together in the garden. They could only go forward, and they did. God sent Adam and Eve out of the garden. An angel and a sword was put at the edge of the garden so that they could not go back, but only go forward. God went with them on their journey to help them to be the best creators they could be, and to be with God in this new way, and to stay one with God. My prayer is that these words are as empowering for you as they are for me. We are daily absorbing and moving through an incredible amount of differences. And yet I wonder what it looks like to lean into the freedom of co-creating something new with God. When I find myself waiting and wishing to go back to a previous time in life, a pre-COVID time, it's easy to sink into a place of despair. I wonder what might happen if we stop waiting for normal to come back again. I wonder what could happen if we lean into the truth that God goes with us and that we can go forward. I wonder what might happen if we stay curious about how we can take things apart and put them back together again in new ways. And I wonder how a present moment and forward-facing mindset can renew hope for the future and help us to continue to make meaning.